The problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds.
It's opportunities. We all discuss it here on a platform that you have to communicate with us live, and of course if you are listening on demand, by getting in touch. And I certainly have had an incredible amount of correspondence lately. Thank you so much for getting in touch. We love to do this with open hearts and open minds, and I say that, but it is about provoking discussion to hear everybody's sides of the story. I'm your host, Sarah Perriam, and the privilege is actually all mine to bring you this show Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday from 7 p.m. on behalf of my wonderful team here based in Lincoln and Canterbury, and of course in alliance with the great team at Farmers Weekly. Many of you like to listen to this on demand on podcast, but of course we are live Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday from 7 p.m. Head to sarahscountry.com for more. Now, I want to start off by taking a moment to acknowledge those that work tirelessly for our industry to contribute their incredible passion for the land and their community and their family. It's their shoulders that we have the ability to stand on to progress this country. There has been some sad news across the country and a few different sad passings and of significance in terms of their contribution to the sector. All I want to do tonight is acknowledge anybody that has passed that makes significant contribution from as small as their family right through to the wider industry. And our thoughts are with those families and those communities today. Now, we are heading, we're here at home, in my home, and welcome to my home here in Lincoln. It's an absolute privilege to have you here sharing this live on video. I'm looking down. We were having dinner before, and I absolutely cannot believe that I'm seeing daylight at 7 o'clock. I mean, we do have daylight, but this is like screaming sun still out sort of stuff. And it's just, that gives you that spring buzz, doesn't it? But at the same time, if you followed last night, my mother is staying. It's an absolute pleasure to have her to come to stay. It's not often that she does. And we went for our morning walk with Dolly the Schnauzer this morning and took her around the Lincoln subdivisions and showed her how the progression's going. And there was a mighty frost out. So where I'm going with this is the fact that, you absolutely think 26 degrees it was last week in the not Catlins, but in terms of the Clutha district, Balclutha through Carker Point, I'm hearing horrendous snows in terms of blocked roads and people trying to navigate their way home safely across the roads in rural Otago and Southland, my home base. And it's all so fast that life can change and how fast the seasons are. But at the same time, this does happen every year. And of course, we really get excited about what spring is coming, and then the next moment it all changes. So on that, in the comments below, where I'd like to go with this is I'm getting excited about my veggie garden, because you do not plant your veggie garden any earlier than Labour weekend in the South Island, because you always might get that cheeky little nasty frost come forward. So I'm doing some planning. But the thing is, we're having dinner tonight, beautiful #not sponsored my food bag with my Dan and Joel in the producer booth there, and I was starting to have that discussion around what are the foods that you don't like. It's very interesting, isn't it, when you're a child coming through and how your tastes change. But there's certain things that my tastes have not changed. I'm going to admit it right now. I can't stand yams. People say, what's your special dietary requirements when I go to do a speaking event? And I just put no yams. I think they're looking for something else. I'd love to know, what is those things you've really still tried? You've tried really hard to like. I mean, I tried to like avocado. Surprise, surprise, everyone loves avocado. I think I've just had a couple of bad experiences with the odd rotten one, especially in a hot panini. Oh, terrible, puts you off avocado, and I just still can't stomach it. I'd love to know in the comments live below. Let's share those things that you really have tried. My mum, she cannot stand broad beans, still from an early age. Do I have a microphone on in the dining room, i.e. the producer booth? Joel, and I know if Joel's there, he did actually share with me about a certain thing I used to cook him, and he's just admitted he doesn't really like it.
What do I not like?
Couscous.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Couscous just doesn't sit right with me sometimes.
I think it's a male thing. I don't want to be genderized, but a lot of males don't like couscous.
It's not a male thing, I don't think. I don't know.
Coriander.
It was just the texture put me off.
Did you know coriander is? Apparently males, a high percentage, can't eat coriander. Can you eat coriander?
Coriander's, fair, I guess.
Dan, over to you. What is those one vegetable you can't stand? Still.
Actually, I can't think of any, Sarah. Sorry to disappoint.
Okay.
I love veggies. I love growing them. I love eating them.
Oh, well, you're going to be a breeze to cook for. In the comments below, please, let's share and have a bit of fun. And, of course, let us know around the snow, the progress of the snow around the South Island. I'd love to see some photos as well in the comments. If you have had some horrendous snow, let us know below. Now, coming up tonight in Sarah's Country, after 7:20, property brokers Rural General Manager Conrad Wilkshire believes despite the pandemic, rural real estate is on the upward swing. Looking forward to catching up with Conrad, especially to discuss lifestyle properties right through to where the confidence lies in dairy. Towards 7:30, Rabobank protein and sustainability analyst Blake Holgate expects Chinese consumers to continue to view beef as an increasingly appealing substitute to pork, of course, following African swine fever. And I'd love to touch on that rural confidence survey at a little bit of a low, and of course, going into an election, where that is. And then to close the show, recently released data by Land, Air, Water Aotearoa, known as LAWA, shows this week waterways health is under pressure. We get a bigger picture on water quality, and I love to find out more about the innovative farm management initiatives that are going on. So we're going to be joined by AgResearch's Chief Scientist, Rich McDowell, after 7:40 to get a bit of a feel on where our land and water, that National Science Challenge, is positioning farmers in terms of our water quality across this country. Very positive, and looking forward to actually asking Rich after Damien O'Connor last night how this single plan could include a lot of this farm environment plan merger Damien is speaking about. But first up on Sarah's Country, farmers are aware of the benefits of native biodiversity. A study has shown, and 92% have shown that they want to do what they can to preserve it. We find out what the barriers are, though, for farmers. Up next with Dr. Fleur Maseyk. This is Sarah's Country. Well, the majority of New Zealand's sheep and beef farmers do already recognise the benefits of protecting native biodiversity on their land. However, more needs to be done to help them preserve it. This is according to a new survey, and you can read the article in this week's Farmers Weekly thanks to Colin Williscroft. The study's lead author, Dr. Fleur Maseyk, says the Maseyk. I'm going to take that from the top. Maseyk. Sorry, Fleur. I want to make sure I've got it right. Okay. Cool. You guys good? Yeah. Awesome. The majority of New Zealand sheep and beef farmers do already recognise the benefits of protecting native biodiversity on their land. However, more needs to be done to help them preserve it, and this is according to a new survey. You can read more about it in the article in this week's Farmers Weekly, thanks to Colin Williscroft. The study's lead author, Dr. Fleur Maseyk, says phone interviews with 500 farmers found only 8% of them thought that there was no benefits to having native biodiversity on the properties. I'm not surprised at all. And as well as identifying the values of benefits in biodiversity on farm, this study also highlighted sticking points that act as barriers. And Dr. Fleur joins us now. Welcome to Sarah's Country. Fleur, firstly, let's talk about those barriers. What are they for farmers to be able to identify the values and protect them?
Yeah, so as you said, the farmers definitely identified a lot more advantages to having biodiversity on farm than disadvantages, but they did identify some, and they really do cluster around cost and time.
And of course, the benefits, certainly we all know, but let's talk through some of those that were identified out of farmers' mouths to them in terms of not only themselves, their operation, but in a wider social context.
So what was really surprising about the study was that nearly 50% of the advantages those farmers identified were around social values. And these were things like leaving a legacy for future generations, real feel-good factor, the aesthetic of the farm was mentioned quite a lot, but also really interestingly was that having native biodiversity on farm improved quality of life and well-being, and that was recognised not just for the farmer and their family, but also for their staff.
What about some of those barriers around better access to information? And you do mention about money, but also to knowledge.
Yeah, that did come through, that there was one of the barriers that may prevent undertaking more pro-biodiversity management practice on farm was perhaps a lack of knowledge about quite what to do or when to do it, how to do it, what was important, what to do first even.
What about when it came to capability and resource not only on cost, but the availability of plants, I understand, is in high demand?
Yes, and especially as everyone is trying to do a whole lot more, that is true, that there's some institutional capability and capacity that needs to increase as well to help support our farmers do the good work that they are doing and encourage more to make the shift to undertaking more biodiversity management on farm. Yeah, we did find that that farmers were stacking those financial considerations up against environmental and social considerations, and that was perhaps influencing whether they would undertake more pro-biodiversity management or not.
And when we're talking about access to the cash to be able to do it, really is cash the only answer in terms of being able to find people to help plant it? And what sort of responses came through in that connection with the rural community and coming together around this?
There's quite a lot of that in that question there, Sarah. I think there was a lot that came through about the community connections when people getting together to do better by their biodiversity on farms, and neighbours helping each other, and catchment level, catchment groups as well. But I think it was quite clear what was coming through. Yes, it did centre on cost, but that did flow into some of that other support needed by farmers, and our studies certainly showed that we need to perhaps have a suite of policy responses to help shift all those barriers so that we're incentivising and supporting to encourage more of that good stuff.
Did anything come through in terms of farmers not knowing and the uncertainty around regulation changing and being able to get stuck in but not knowing if it was going to get changed on them again?
Actually, concern about policy and regulation that came up, but really, really very infrequently. And in fact, it came up is an advantage as well, in that doing these works on farm helped get them through some of those policy requirements. So they saw that as an advantage, more so than a disadvantage.
And where to? Sorry.
I was just going to say it's becoming quite clear that thinking about biodiversity is a really useful tool to help improve farm performance across a number of measures, and in doing so helping address a number of the challenges that we're facing, such as impact of climate change and declining biodiversity and increasing resilience and sustainability on farm came through as well. So it's not just seen as a negative of policy requirements around looking after biodiversity, but actually a positive in that it is enabling them to address those issues.
Where does a study like this land in terms of action moving forward?
I think it's really useful to help us get to the heart of what we need to do to encourage and enable more pro-biodiversity management on farm, and what we might need to do to help influence that shift to transitioning to more sustainable farms.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, Dr. Fleur Maseyk there, and as the study's lead author. As I said, you can catch the rest of the article in this week's Farmers Weekly. Now, this study was first published in the New Zealand Journal of Ecology as part of the Farming and Nature Conservation Project, funded by New Zealand's Biological Heritage National Science Challenge. So seek that out in terms of the full details around the study. I will be looking forward to talking to our future guests, and particularly Rich McDowell towards the end of the program, Chief Scientist for Our Land, Our Water, around putting this to him, farmers' attitude to change. We talked to Damien O'Connor last night around his policy announcement of rolling out a single plan that will include all things as well as biodiversity. So this is an ongoing thing, but great to see in that survey that farmers 92% believe the importance of biodiversity on farm. They get it. Let's just get that message out there to the wider part of New Zealand that farmers 92%. Right, I'm going to cut to a break. After the break, we're going to go to Conrad Wilkshire from Property Brokers. Despite this pandemic, the rural property market hasn't taken a hit. We'll find out more details very shortly.
This is Sarah's Country.
Delicious. Ever wondered where it starts? Does it start with care? Respect. Fresh grass 365 days a year. The truth is, delicious doesn't start in a single moment or with a single ingredient. Delicious starts here.
This is Sarah's Country.
those who have just joined us, welcome to Sarah's Country. It's an absolute pleasure to have you. Of course, technically it is in people's body clock 6 p.m. So therefore a lot of people were still out there making the most of daylight. This is with regards to our live broadcast Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday from 7 p.m. However, we do know a lot of people consume our podcast. And how are you finding it? You had those early, the daylight was just starting to come at the start of your day, and then bang, that hour just comes back in. It takes a lot to adjust, but in the end, isn't daylight saving an absolute delight? And of course, today's comments are around vegetables, because we're heading into spring and I'm starting to plan my vegetable garden. I like to try on new things. I had a shocker run with broccoli last year. That is my absolute mission, to try and navigate. And I'm getting some great comments in from our regulars, and challenge those who haven't commented yet before, wherever you are watching live. I'd love to hear from you. In particular, anything about where you're watching from. That would be lovely. But the topic tonight, what is that vegetable, or as it's extending in the comments, those things that you've tried since childhood to try and like, you really still can't stomach? I've got some great things coming in. Liver from school diner days. Dad's go-to was liver and bacon stew when Mum was away. Oh, God. Horrible. And John says to tell my mum to peel the broad beans and they'll taste nicer. I actually served her up last night smashed cannellini beans, and she had no idea. She thought it was potato. Brussels sprouts is another one. It's a common dislike. And wife says she can't stand Brussels sprouts, as I said, another one. But tamarillos and celery. It's an acquired taste from Brett. I'd love to hear from you wherever you are in the country, and we are following. I'd love some snow reports. Please put down in terms of how many inches or centimetres that you've had wherever you are. I hope that you are staying safe around the country, and it hasn't caused you too much disruption, especially when it comes to lambing and calving. Our thoughts definitely are with you. Now, turning to our next guest. There is a lot of activity happening in rural real estate, and this is despite the COVID-19 lockdown. Rural real estate has continued a upward swing with the recent REINZ, this is the Real Estate Institute of New Zealand statistics, saying that 386 farms sold from June to August this year, and that was the best 3-month period since 2016. I'm wondering though, has this got anything to do with a bit of a damming up with this lockdown? And joining us now is Property Brokers Rural General Manager Conrad Wilkshire. Evening, Conrad. What's going on?
Sarah.
Is this really just a flow-on effect from the lockdown, or are we seriously seeing some hot demand?
Oh no, there's definitely a rubber band effect from the COVID situation, no question about that. Compared to the city, and particularly Auckland, which is probably more of a Shanghai effect, there's definitely a rubber band in terms of the sales coming through for New Zealand rural land sales. So not only July was very good, and August has been better, but you've got to remember there was you can't really stop a market. And actually Tim Morton often says this, like if you look back, whether it's the GFC or whatever, you have these big events, but ultimately the market is still the market. And we've seen an effect with that dam effect you spoke about play through. So, you've got to look at the annualised sales and not just the last 3 months, and keep an eye on that, because that's telling the whole story. But there's no question that, we should take a lot of confidence from the fact that people still have goals, they still have objectives, and real estate's still happening as a consequence.
Okay, so 12 out of 14 regions have shown this increase in farm sales. Bay of Plenty and Nelson dropped away. Why in those particular areas was there that drop-off, do you think?
Oh, look, I couldn't speak to that individually, but both those areas have strong horticulture influence, and there is always seasonality. And I think the other thing to remember in all these regions, we're only ever talking about a handful of sales. And particularly in dairy, but horticulture too. So, there's only ever so many sales. So there's always a bit of seasonality when you look at that data month on month, or even over a 3-month period.
I think last time we spoke, there's a lot to do with confidence in the market. This is from a payout perspective with dairy right through to where regulations might land. How are you finding that the risk adverse getting back into the market as such, especially pre-election?
Yeah. If I sort of zero in on the dairy market, for example, there's $11 billion been returned to New Zealand farmers through Fonterra alone this last season. And so that's probably, and that's one of the fourth best payouts in Fonterra's history. You look at that and you compare that against the confidence surveys, the Rabobank confidence surveys that have been commented on. There is a real disconnect between that and what actually is going on. There's actually what you've got now is a strong value story where you are seeing the trending. There has been a reset in dairy farm prices. There's no question about that. And if you, again, take out a couple of outliers on dairy sales, the national median is much more closer to 30 than it is 40,000 per hectare. But the underlying returns have been improving. So if you look at dairy, as New Zealand dairy as an example, yes, sure, there are regulatory headwinds, and there's been some, real challenges put in front of farmers that they have to face into, and they continue to do that and have been for a while. But if you actually rule a big line under it, that's one of the most interesting investment stories going, where everywhere else you're seeing yields contracting, yet the reset is already present in the market, yet the returns are improving or certainly very solid, and the forward outlook's very good. So you've got some of the best underlying returns. So if you're buying a farm for the first time, and I've reviewed a couple of case studies of that, they're getting really good returns. And if you're in Westland at the moment with some of their advances and you're in your first farm, you're off to a flyer and you can get in there on very good price points. So there's always been those opportunities for first farms. They're still there. And in fact, I'd argue the value opportunities around the country, if you're prepared to have a look at some of that second and third tier country, they're quite amazing compared to where they might have been, say, 5 years ago.
What are some of those key things you say that the gap has moved in terms of first farms and younger people getting into the market? Conrad, what would be sort of some of your advice on how that is actually starting to ramp up and support first farm buyers?
Obviously, the lending criteria today, while the money's never been cheaper, accessing credit probably hasn't never been harder in some respects. Though I will say that there's plenty of examples of people always beating the odds, and I haven't spoken to any farmer that said it was easy getting to their first farm. So I think really what the opportunity now is there's a lot more, the underlying interest rates are there, so there's opportunities. Sometimes we're seeing examples of people coming along with equity partnerships or leasing as an interim step and getting their first start. And there's all kinds of ways in which that can happen now that simply weren't available, say, 5 years ago. So there is actually a real interest in there to actually look at putting money back into farming, and there is a lot of sensible ways you can go about doing that.
Lifestyle, Canterbury particularly. Hey, we saw the writing on the wall. Expats wanted to come home. They're still coming home in their droves, let alone all those people, cooped up over lockdown, wanting to get out in the country. Do you think there'll be a swing back when people realise how hard it is and then the market peeps off and there's That's what I've decided I'm counting on, Conrad.
Well, if you consider the typhoon we've had in the Manawatu and the swamp I've got to navigate on my lifestyle block with my ride-on lawnmower, which many farmers will be smirking about, the reality is that a lifestyle does have its challenges, but it's got its rewards. And I think we're seeing a massive shift in lifestyle. I don't think it's temporary. You look at the zoning and what's going on, people really enjoy the space, and it's often a lot of people's dream to have that little bit of extra ground. And so I don't think that's going away. And what I think the effect you're seeing in lifestyle is you're actually seeing, and I think I've spoken about this previously, the regulations have changed, and it's allowed a lot of people into the market through KiwiSaver, so into their first home, and they're buying the properties that people are using as they're leveraging into the lifestyle block. And certainly lifestyle blocks probably turn over every 7 years, but so do houses.
It's interesting, Maybe the Kiwi dream has gone from quarter acre to 4,000 square, 4 hectare block. New Zealanders, we like our space. We're actually quite private people, I think.
Yeah. I've got neighbours all around me on these lifestyle blocks. It's a smaller one that I used to be on, and everybody's got chickens except us, and they've all got veggie pods and gardens, and right into it. But I think we'll still go to New World on Saturday as well.
Yeah, I think that you end up with the oversupply of the eggs because they've sort of haven't quite predicted how much they produce and how much
Exactly.
they. Hey, Conrad, thank you so much for joining Sarah's Country. Great to have an update there on the rural real estate market. Conrad Wilkshire is the Rural General Manager for Property Brokers. Yeah, absolutely interesting. And of course, if you've been following Sarah's Country, I have moved into town in June. I got so busy, I thought, bugger, I don't have time to do that lifestyle block, but it certainly moving back out to the country is hot in my seats. But you know what? I've decided this town living thing is not that bad. It really isn't. I had the neighbour bring in my wheelie bins for me because they'd blown over in the wind. Bless his cotton socks. Coming up in Serious Country, Blake Holgate from Rabobank will join us to talk not only about the latest report, which shows beef's lead is over pork, and this is the flow-on effect continuously from the African swine fever and what it is doing to our beef markets. But also too, as Conrad alluded to, the Rabobank Confidence Survey. Let's find out what farmers are thinking. This is going into, of course, an election in the next couple of weeks. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Get busy over this next break. I want to hear what are those things that you cannot stand still from this day eating from a child. You've tried really, really hard. I still cannot stand pumpkin. I think I've got a thing for root vegetables. I'd love to hear from you, and of course give us an update on the weather wherever you are in this beautiful paradise known as Aotearoa, New Zealand.
This is Sarah's Country.
Delicious. Ever wondered where it starts? Does it start with care? Respect. Fresh grass 365 days a year. The truth is, delicious doesn't start in a single moment or with a single ingredient. Delicious starts here.
This is Sarah's Country.
Well, Rabobank's latest Chinese protein report highlights the ongoing impact of African swine fever consumption and how it is also prompting some major shifts in distribution and purchasing behaviours to beef options. So it's actually looking good for New Zealand beef exports. Consumers are increasingly starting to combine beef into their home consumption when it used to be largely consumed whilst eating out. This is replacing pork and opening new opportunities for beef market growth. Even with the gradual increase in red meat consumption, a 20% drop in pork supplies reported last year and a further 20% drop forecast this year, the world's largest pork consumers are pivoting to alternative protein sources. Joining us now to discuss this is the report's author, Rabobank's Blake Holgate. Evening, Blake.
Evening, Sarah.
Now I know, sorry, and before we get stuck into pork, you're in Dunedin. How's the weather?
It's crisp and chilly, but as of now, no snow on the ground, which is an improvement from about 12 hours ago.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I've been nippy as, and no one likes to be in Dunedin on a cold day. I certainly know that from experience. Hey, let's talk about this. A significant drop, 20% in pork supplies. That is considerable. Talk us through how this demand for beef has continued on from China.
Yeah, you're right, Sarah. 20% when you talk about the size of a country like China is significant, and New Zealand knows as beef exporters we've really benefited over the last 12 months. We've seen a major jump in our exports into China over that time period, and what that has done is it has exposed a lot of Chinese consumers to beef that previously wouldn't have eaten beef. So previously beef was significantly more expensive than pork. With pork being in short supply, that's driven up their domestic pork prices, got them pretty close to where beef prices are, and they thought, heck, well, let's try some beef. They're trying it, it's exposing them to it, and we think that was a trend that will stick beyond this sort of shorter term African swine fever impact.
Education-wise, in terms of e-commerce and retail, with the effect of COVID, you say that they have been exposed and consume beef normally in restaurants. How has the New Zealand processors been able to capitalise on this in terms of sharing the benefits of pork from a protein perspective and benefit from the sort of aspirational eating that is within a restaurant?
Yeah, a couple of key points. You alluded to it there. With COVID, with the lockdown, it has forced a lot of Chinese consumers to cook and eat at home, and beef traditionally has been an eat-out protein. So with some of the established e-commerce or online platforms, that has enabled our exporters to get products to consumers in their homes. But some of the other, I think, really important longer term trends we're starting to see with Chinese consumers is increased segmentation of their consumption patterns. So historically, it's been what we'd consider sort of largely a mass market, so hard to differentiate yourself within that market. As they become wealthier, we are seeing the development of a sort of a premiumization segment, and they're the consumers that are increasingly looking for and willing to pay for higher quality beef, and beef for some of those sort of taste attributes like our sustainability, high levels of animal welfare and ethical production. So it really feeds in well to that.
I was really hoping you were going to say that because, of course, in your title is the word sustainability. And last night we had Stephanie Honey from Beef and Lamb and we had Damien O'Connor on, and that was very big about we need to be doing this for market access because the rest of the world is looking for opportunities to shut us out because we're so fantastic at environmental, so great at animal welfare. Yet, when it comes to our Chinese markets and the development of the understanding and care for these things, they're not really there yet. So how do we define that added value when we want to be in that position and not in the commodity space when it comes to the China market?
You're right. For China, it's not so much a market access story at this stage. It's more around how we can differentiate ourselves from some of those lower cost producers like South America, for example, where we're seeing a lot of competition. And the ability to do that is one, developing the brand, but actually underpinning that with, the verifiable evidence of what we're talking around. So traceability, having data points to actually demonstrate to the market that and backing up our claims is going to become increasingly important going forward because there's a significantly more transparency in the supply chain than there has been historically. And Chinese consumers are very aware of that.
And thanks for a natural segue to the next part that is in Farmers Weekly. This is the confidence survey that Rabobank put out. This is falling to negative 32% net farmer confidence. And this is off the back of fantastic things that you've just said, that we have all the opportunity at our fingertips and our feet, but government policy and COVID-19 has seen this dramatic change of confidence. What is really driving it at the bottom line? Is it misunderstanding of where this is going and in terms of where it could land as our opportunity?
Yeah, look, I mean, negative farmer sentiment is something that's shown up in our rural confidence surveys for probably a good 18 months to 2 years now. I think it's that trade-off between a lot of the topics we're talking about are kind of longer-term opportunities. You know, when we're looking 4 to 5 years out, we have the opportunity to position ourselves really well. The reality is farmers are dealing with some of the challenges here and now. They are going through significant changes in the regulatory space at a number of levels, from fresh water to climate change to biodiversity to high country crown leases, and that's sort of all culminating at the one point. And then on top of that, we have, you know, some of the pressures COVID has brought on to the industry domestically, the pressure that's put on pricing for different sectors. And as I look forward to pricing for this year, perhaps not as optimistic as they have been over the last 12 months. So I think it's that sort of that disconnect between, yes, there's some fundamental long-term opportunities for the industry, but as I said, farmers have to deal with the here and now, and they're looking 12 months out, and they're sort of seeing a number of challenges. They're sort of just wondering how they're going to work their way through.
Certainly is a hard place to navigate with so much uncertainty and to try and stay optimistic. Dairy, on the other hand, though, has had a lot of signals for optimism. Their spirits must be higher.
Yeah, look, in the latest survey, we did see a slight improvement in confidence from both the horticultural and dairy sector. Remembering some of the price signals 3 months ago when we last did the series, the confidence survey for dairy probably wasn't as strong as it is now, and it was really the sheep and beef farmers that confidence has taken a hit. And again, I think they're probably looking at what their farm gate prices have done over the last couple of months and have been very flat at a time in a year we'd expect to be increasing with reduced supplies, and are looking forward to when the new season lambs come online, and have probably concerns around where those prices will go.
Just before you sneak off, Blake, I'm not going to let you get off the hook. We're talking about vegetables or even anything that you haven't been able to stomach since you were a kid. You've tried, but you still can't. What is it?
Look, I might flip it around sort of the slightly differently and say how much I enjoy vegetables now, and discovering there's other ways to cook them other than just steaming them in a pot. I was sort of brought up like probably a lot of other New Zealand, particularly farm kids, where veggies were bought in a packet and steamed in a pot. I've discovered there's a whole range of fantastic ways to cook veggies, and they can actually be really, really delicious. So that would be my take.
Absolutely. Boiled to buggery. And we didn't have anything called herbs and spices. It was just salt and pepper. Oh, we're so hard done by, aren't we? Oh, my goodness. Hey, thank you so much, Blake Holgate, there from Rabobank. And, of course, you can read more about both the confidence survey and, of course, the report there on beef eating into pork's lead. To close on Sarah's Country, we're going to be joined by Chief Scientist from AgResearch and, of course, Our Land and Water, Rich McDowell. And this is following, I reached out to Rich. I know that the Land, Air, Water Aotearoa survey was produced by Dr. Roger Young. You may have heard about that on the radio, and they're saying that in the last 10 years, our rivers' quality have not improved. Rich provides an amazing amount of opinion from all aspects in his scientific background and the work that he's doing on some innovative projects that have got some great funding from Our Land and Water. But also, too, I'm really looking forward to, after Damien O'Connor's interview yesterday, on this idea of a single plan and how farm environment plans will be able to merge around this. Looking forward to catching up with Rich to close very shortly on Sarah's Country.
This is Sarah's Country.
Balance has its own team of innovation specialists. It's our job to lead the way, working with some of the most cutting-edge science and research. We've got partnerships with some of the best suppliers in the world, so our farmers get the very best products for New Zealand farms.
And in every region across the country, the conditions are very different, and farmers' and growers' needs are too.
That's why we're always looking for solutions that are just right, like here at our Huntly Service Centre.
And here in Canterbury, we've got a self-service silo, so I can pick up fat when it suits me.
And here in Morrinsville, we've got a world-class mill. That means that we can safely deliver our customers with the freshest, highest quality feed and minerals.
It's about putting the customer first, because that's what drives our business. We've been focusing on faster turnaround of orders. We've got to get the right products to the right places at the right times.
Here in Taranaki, we've got New Zealand's only urea manufacturing plant. It's where we create our premium sustained fertiliser.
We're supplying nationwide and working locally. By getting to know you and what you want to achieve, we can help you get there.
And with the new My Balance platform, Balance has put my farm at my fingertips.
In fact, we offer support in all sorts of ways, sharing the best nutrition practice with farming families across the country. Whether we're talking about animal health, farm productivity,
or looking after our natural environment, sustainability underpins everything we do. We use our local expertise and the latest tools to help farmers and growers navigate the changing regulations, so you can leave your farm in great shape for the future.
And we can be really accurate, avoiding areas like wetlands and waterways with our award-winning Spread Smart tech. It makes the job far safer, more efficient, and gives you the best results.
When you've got access to that kind of know-how, you've got the support you need to make sure you're farming sustainably. It's that kind of thinking that'll keep us going for generations to come.
Together creating the best soil and feed on earth.
Absolutely loving looking down. I'm having a laugh about the comments that you're putting in. The topic tonight, if you've just joined us, is what is some of those things you really tried to like, but you can't. I love this one. Oh no, I'm gonna end with this one actually. Oh my goodness. Sorry, that's my schnauzer. Joel's dealing with rice pudding. I totally agree with you, Jock. That is something I was thinking, what is outside of meat and vegetables that I don't like? Rice pudding, totally right. And this one here, before we get to our next guest, I grew my own Brussels sprouts this year. This is from Brett, thinking it was time to get over it. Yeah, nah, still can't do them. Looks like the pig will be well fed. And Michael said, well, what flavours are you inflicting on your pork? And it made me think about the idea that someone suggested grazing lambs break feeding them on mint. Could be a new thing. I'd love to hear wherever you are watching around the world and, of course, across this beautiful country. We call Aotearoa, New Zealand. We're here on Ceres Country. Now, to close the show, we're talking around this annual update. It comes from New Zealand's river water quality monitoring data from Landia Water Aotearoa. And it is found that the more intensive the land use, the more impact it has on health of waterways. We have wrapped our head around this. There is a lot of talk there around the health of urban waterways. This is not what we're going to touch on too much tonight. These samples were collected over the past 10 years from river sites around the country that show that there are certain catchments still under pressure dominated by pasture management systems. And the native vegetation streams, it's worse around our urban waterways. But the challenge to us is, of course, to understand, and the farmers and growers that watch Ceres Country, how we can navigate this. Is this data full and true in its entirety? And what about the improvements that we have made over the last 10 years? So joining us now is Chief Scientist for AgResearch, involved in our Land and Water National Science Challenge, Rich McDowell. Rich, thank you so much for coming on. I have reached out to you as opposed to, I do have to state, the author, Dr. Roger Young, who has done a fantastic job in his role, more because we do want to bring context around this. This whole claim that our waterways have not improved in the last 10 years, can you explain to our audience, is that fully true?
In the way that it's presented, it is. However, there's a bit of context that needs to be put around this. So there are two things that this data shows us. One is the current state, when you quite rightly point out comparison of different land uses, urban probably being the best in the pasture, then forestry and probably native. And then there are trends. Now, the way that those are presented, they're presented in 5-year chunks, okay? And they've just done a rolling average year on year and saying that there's no real change in that. Now, what that's doing, though, is it's collating everything into one number, and it's also looking at classes. They've split it up to bands. So A is really good. D is the equivalent of a red card, I'm afraid. and that's the equivalent of bottom lines, I guess, in the current policy sphere. Now, a band can be quite large, and so here's the rub. So something like ammonia, and you take the C band in there, they've coloured it orange, and it varies from about 30 to 240 parts per billion. So even if you were to halve, going from, say, 240 to 120, you still wouldn't qualify as having any sort of change. And so when you look at the data in more depth, you can actually see that I think this year, it was over a 10-year period, it was 67% of the sites were actually improving in terms of trends, because that was looked at year upon year upon year, as opposed to in a band. So it's a little bit more, I guess, nuanced than just the snapshot that we get. But yeah, and also there are other changes as well. I can explain a bit of those too.
Yeah, and I think that is the thing. And the reason I reached out to you is because you do such a great job of taking the headline science and bringing context around it. Now farmers see these things or hear them on Talkback Radio and go, oh goodness, all of this work that we've done, and it's not making any difference. What are we making a difference to in the last decade?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, outside of, I mentioned just ammonia there, but there are many other water quality attributes that we measure. And a couple of those, specifically sediment and phosphorus, have probably had quite significant improvements in the last 10 years. So, for example, for phosphorus, I mean, we started off in a situation from 1994 to 2003 where we had 60% of our sites were worsening. Then it flipped around from 2004 to 2013, where we've now got 60% of the sites improving. And that was largely associated with a number of things. Guidelines around what strategies we could use, recognising that we put these in the right place at the right time. We call those critical source areas. Those are getting out into industries, and they're getting out into farmers' hands, and often in the form of farm environment plans. And this is where I guess some of the work has been done in detail in regions like the Horizons region, where they've undertaken I guess a number of plans, about 500,000 hectares from memory. They planted about 14 million trees, and they're already seeing the green shoots, pun intended, of that work. They've got sediment there that's projected to go from about 3.1 million to 1.6 million tonnes. And they've already started seeing significant decreases in that sediment load over that period of time. So, people are doing things. It is working in places, and it gives me confidence, I guess, in the future that we can make more improvement.
It does worry me, Rich, and I'm not going to get political with you, but when, you do hear coming out of the ministry, these sorts of things are going to take decades to change. However, our election cycle is 3 years when we can continue to come back and talk about it. And so therefore, there hasn't been the breadth and depth of testing. And I know when we talked to Andrew Patterson from Central Otago about the money being dropped and the pledges being made, yet all they want is an increase in measurement so that they can have a comparable debate.
Yeah, absolutely. Measurement is quite key, especially when it's been touted as regulation. So, in fact, we always recognise that our current, what we call state of environment system, is not actually up to scratch to giving us the measurements and indeed the confidence that we need in order to make changes in our properties and get credit for them. But there is work going on, I guess not only by us, but also by the ministries and other organisations to determine what that monitoring system is, such that you can have confidence that, say, kilometre down from where you are, 5 k's down, you're actually measuring it and therefore getting credit for it.
And I'd like to know, to close, Rich, how do politicians come up with figures and pledges to bring together a single plan, which will include a lot, and see out the implementation of it, with a lack of capability to enforce and set out through our councils, when we're still just trying to wrap our heads around one, which is the Farm Environment Plan, let alone so many other exercises. I know the work that you do. How do you feel about the blurring of the lines and what may become a minimum standard for market access and the importance of a farm environment plan standalone?
Yeah, I mean, I can see what they're doing. I listened to your interview with Damien O'Connor yesterday, and I can see it's laudable. Okay, you want to reduce the complexity and bring simplicity to it, but I also think you've got to move it from box ticking through to adding value. And so, not only having that one plan that speaks to OSH, to animal welfare, to market access, but it does it in a way that's seen as an incentive. Okay, so where you can incorporate the good things that the industries are doing with their particular farm plans, such that you're able to meet your compliance regime, but then leaving alone the areas where they're using it for market incentives, for premiums, etc. So I think there's a bit of work here to be done, and I know the time frame is bloody tight, but we don't want to get into the position where we're just in paralysis, where we're doing nothing. But I would like to see, I guess, some flexibility to recognise that we're going to do some stuff. We're not going to get it right in the first instance, but to learn from that and adapt, and to do that in a time frame that allows us, allows everyone to adjust on their property. And so whether that's 6 months in the current, horizon, or whether it's 3 years, an election cycle, or 5 years, I think we should just get it right and have a go in the first instance.
Rich, it's an absolute pleasure always to have you on Sarah's Country. I love your practicality and pragmatism that you bring to these discussions, and this will not be the last time. Thank you so much. Rich McDowell is the Chief Scientist for Our Land and Water and based at AgResearch here in Canterbury. And of course, head to Our Land and Water for all of the great work that they're doing in this national challenge. I really love following what's going along there. Puts the positive on what we are doing as a sector. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Sarah's Country, and wherever you have been listening to us on demand. I really, really appreciate the feedback that I have been getting. It's ramping up. Emails are coming in, dropping into the DMs on social media. I love hearing from you, so please keep it up. I read every single one and love to respond, and thank you so much for being such an active and passionate follower of the show as we continue to grow and expand. But of course, this is all about you, and we want to hope to provide open-minded and open-hearted discussions to the challenges that we face in farming food and fibre, as well as actually provide some inspiration that there is optimism and opportunity, because God, you've got to get out of bed for something, and that's the main thing that we are focused on here at Sarah's Country. Of course, produced in alliance with the fantastic team at Farmers Weekly that hits your mailboxes at the start of the week with the most in-depth agri-journalism and market analysis in New Zealand. So until next time, tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, last show for the week, take care of yourself, your family, and good night and go well.
This is